Only 163 men have ran the 100-meter dash in under 10 seconds since we started recording the times in 1896. Since 1896, almost 50 billion people have lived on planet Earth. That means they are faster than 99.9999997% of all people that have ever lived on the Earth. So what makes these athletes so different? Sprint speed is literally a result of two things: how many steps you take during the whole race and how much ground you cover with each step. In order to do this, you need to produce a ton of force and spend as little time on the ground as possible. You essentially want to become like a bouncy ball. A bouncy ball can bounce into the air really high with barely any force thrown behind it, right? If you just drop a bouncy ball, it's gonna bounce really high. And this effect is multiplied when you launch it into the ground as hard as you can. This property of storing and releasing energy is called elasticity. And it's basically how badly a material wants to return to its original shape after being stretched. And there is one material in our body that is the most elastic, and that is your tendons. So you basically want your tendons to be able to store a ton of energy and recoil very, very quickly. In order to do this, you need extremely stiff tendons. And because the ground contact times in sprinting are so small, you want the stiffest tendons possible. However, a stiff tendon is really hard to stretch. And the thing that stretches those tendons are your muscles. However, you don't have a lot of time to stretch them. Let's look at this sprint in slow motion. You see that his foot hits the ground and then recoils off. The average ground contact time in an Olympic sprinter is 80 to 100 milliseconds. That is nothing. So you need your muscles to contract extremely quickly. So the second property that the fastest humans on Earth have in common is they have more type 2 muscle fibers than the rest of us. What does that mean? Your nervous system consists of your brain and it innervates all the muscles in your body. Your muscles consist of muscle fibers. However, not all muscle fibers are created equally. Type 2 muscle fibers are bigger, contract with more force, contract more quickly, but they also fatigue very quickly. And this just so happens to be what we need for running faster. Because if you can contract your muscles very forcefully, very quickly, that is enough to stretch an extremely stiff tendon. And voila, you have low ground contact time that produces a lot of force so you can sprint faster. This also happens to be the exact qualities we need to jump higher. So how can we get stiffer tendons and how can we get more type 2 muscle fibers? Stiffening your tendons is easy. You do that through resistance training. Resistance training has been shown in research to improve the stiffness of your tendons over time, more so than plyometrics. However, you can't turn your type 1 muscle fibers into type 2 muscle fibers, but you can teach your type 1 muscle fibers to act more like type 2 fibers, and you can increase the size of the type 2 fibers that you already have. So you essentially increase the percentage of type 2 to type 1. You do this by doing plyometrics, power training, and lifting and moving with maximum intent.